All right, this is chapter 3, section 3, and this chapter section focuses on Egyptian religion, and it starts with a quote from the Book of the Dead. You will live forever. You will live again. You will live forever. Behold, you will be young forever. We have a picture here of Anubis, and he is working his mummification magic on this mummy. So we're going to learn about Egyptian religion today, kind of by talking about what they believe happened to a person when they died. So these words that were just chanted, you will live again, you'll live forever, behold, you'll be young forever. The priest chanted these words as the royal family wept over the body of their most important member, the Pharaoh. 100 days had passed since he died, or she. During this time, the royal officials had worked on his body. After wrapping the body in many strips of linen, they placed the king in a gold-covered coffin. It was decorated to resemble the man in all his royal glory. The Egyptians believed in an afterlife or a life after death. With each step of the funeral, there were prayers to help the pharaoh's soul on his way to the afterlife. Then the nobles and the royal family followed the body as it was carried to the royal tomb. Workers closed the tomb and the mourners went home. The pharaoh's journey to the afterlife had just begun. Religion and Egyptian life. Here's a picture of Amenron, which is kind of like a fusion of two different lower and upper Egypt god. For the people of ancient Egypt, religion was an important part of daily life. It was the way people explained the workings of nature. Why was there an unexpected long period without rain? What caused sickness and death? The Egyptians believed that only magical spirits could control these events. So they tried to please these spirits, their gods. Each part of Egypt had its own gods and goddesses and had their own temples. The gods of Upper Egypt were different from the gods of Lower Egypt. Over the centuries, however, ancient Egyptians came to believe in several groups of gods. These included gods who were shown as humans with animal heads. Among them was Osiris, god of the living and the dead. The chief god of the ancient Egyptians was Amenron. He protected the rich and the poor. The Egyptians believed that Amenron was born each morning in the east and died each evening in the west. That's why the west was believed to be the home of the dead. Egyptians preferred not to be on the west bank of the Nile after nightfall because they believed that the spirits of the dead lived there. According to Egyptian belief, Osiris, the god of the afterlife, had a family. Isis, his wife, was the most powerful of all Egyptian goddesses. The god of the sky, Horus, was his son. Egyptians worshipped Isis as a great mother who protected the health of her children. In Egyptian art, Isis and Osiris are often shown together. Life after death. See if we can see what's happening in that picture. Look really closely. We got some stuff going on. See if we can zoom in a little bit more. Maybe a little bit more than that. Okay. So we have people who are watching what's happening. They look like they're spectating something. These are judges. We have some people who look like they're busy doing some things. We got Anubis here again. So Anubis we know is a god, right? It's the jackal head. And so there's another god here, Thoth. He has like a bird beak, ibis beak. That's how I know who that is. And then a Mut. I think that's a Mut. We'll find out. They'll tell us as we read. The ancient Egyptians believed that the spirits of the dead made their way to the afterlife in heavenly boats. Once there, if they lived right in this life, they spent their days meeting and eating and drinking with their friends and family who had died. The souls of the dead could not survive without food and clothing and other items from this life, however. The Egyptians took care of this by burying the dead with their possessions that they had enjoyed in this life. A pharaoh's tomb could contain everything from sandals to furniture to even his pets, like a favorite horse. Egyptians believed that mummies, or bodies that were well preserved, could make it so that the spirit could exist in the afterlife. The bodies of important people, usually royalty, were mummified. The process took 2 or 3 months. That's why the pharaoh at the beginning, it had been 100 days since his death. Workers carefully removed the organs in his body. The body was then filled with a natural salt called natron and stored for at least 42 days. During that time, it was completely dried out. Once dry, the body was cleaned and bathed in spices. Then it was wrapped with long linen bandages. Arms and legs were bandaged tightly to the body. A well-wrapped mummy had up to 20 layers of bandages. While workers were preparing the mummy, artisans were busy carving the coffin. Actually, there were more than one coffin. A pharaoh had 3 or 4 coffins. The coffins fit one inside the other nicely, like a nest of boxes. The innermost coffin was usually shaped like a human body, with the head of a person's face painted on the cover. Here we have Ramesses. We're just kind of going to go through a few of these Egyptian pharaohs who were then became mummies. We happen to have them because we dug them up. So we have pictures of them. So now that you got a good look at Ramesses II, scientists unwrapped the mummy of Ramesses II and found that although some 3,000 years had passed since his death, his facial structure and hair remained well preserved. Here's Tutankhamen. The gold portrait mask was one of many treasures found in King Tutankhamen's tomb. In 1922, an Egyptologist named Howard Carter discovered a buried staircase that led to a sealed tomb. When the tomb was opened, Carter and others in the party found fantastic treasures, items made of gold, alabaster, ebony, and precious stones. Within the burial chamber was the greatest treasure of all, the mummified body of King Tutankhamen. The 18-year-old boy king, encased in 3 nested coffins. The outer 2 were wooden, while the innermost coffin was made of solid gold. And you see that remember we just talked about Amenron, right? The little suffix at the end of his name. He made that himself to Amen's glory. And then we have his dad, Akhenaten. Akhenaten, he believes in a different religion. And so his suffix on his name was to the god Aton, who he believed was the only god. So Akhenaten was monotheistic. And we know that Egypt was a polytheistic country. So he's kind of a monotheist among many polytheists. Okay, so after he died, Tutankhamen was like, I'm gonna do that too, but with my religion. And so there you go. So Akhenaten, King Tut's father, a king with one god. Oh, I guess I told you all that already. Akhenaten, who became pharaoh in 1353 BCE, gave up the old gods. He had their names chipped off of their temples. Like the Israelites, Akhenaten worshipped only one god. His god's name was Aton or Aten. I hear it that way a lot. The life-giving disk of the sun. So sun god, one god, done. The Egyptian people did not accept this monotheism. However, after the king's death, they went back to worshiping many gods. They played along, I guess, during his reign, and then they just went back to doing their thing afterwards. Here's what tombs looked like, pyramid tombs, that is. This is not the best picture, but I think it does the job. So you kind of see there are air shafts kind of drilled into the side, not drilled, but and so you're able to breathe in there. And so the king's chamber is up here. If you were to walk down a ramp, you'd get to the queen's chamber down a hallway. It's a grand gallery there as well with all the fun things. But there was also this subterranean chamber. And a lot of times there was a false chamber. So as the pyramid was finished and people were leaving, they would actually, as you're kind of going up a ramp to get to these places, right? There's no stairs. You're just kind of walking uphill. And they would have other pathways to follow. And so when they were done with the king and the queen and everything was in place and they were just done with the pyramid, done, moving on, they would block that wall. And so you would kind of walk past it without even knowing it was a thing. And the hallway would continue and you wouldn't even know. And you just keep following what you were doing. And then they had false rooms, false kings, false whatever. So that if grave robbers snuck into the pyramid, they'd think they had the right people, but they wouldn't. That was the plan anyway. Worked for some people, I guess. You're not supposed to dig around with dead bodies, just saying. When people are buried, they kind of don't want to be disturbed. All right, so planning for a pharaoh's tomb began as soon as he was crowned. The earliest royal tombs were made of mud brick, of course, but however, as time went on, tomb building became an art. The pharaohs of the 4th dynasty built the largest and most famous tombs of all. These were called pyramids, huge buildings with 4 sloping walls shaped like triangles. And the bottom's a square, right? I mean, it's a ground, but it's in a square shape. Most of the pyramids were built during the Old Kingdom. We talked about that, in the last lesson. But at a site called Giza, you can find the largest pyramid, the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khufu, right? It is one of several enormous monuments. Ooh. Scrolling is a problem on this computer. Building the pyramids required a great deal of organization. The Great Pyramid, for example, is made up of more than 2 million stones. The average weight of each stone, 5,000 pounds. These are massive. Each stone had to be hauled up the side of the pyramid and put into its place. It could take 20 or more years to build a pyramid. The project began with the selection of a site on the west bank of the Nile. You want to be on the right side when you die, right? Remember that the west bank was the land of the dead. Once the site was chosen, workers cleared the ground. Engineers set the pyramid square so that the sides faced the main points of the compass. So those 4 squares of corners, vertices of that square are pointing north, south, east, and west. Workers then cut the building blocks. Stone for the inner parts came for the pyramids came from nearby quarries, but fine stone for the outside came from further away. Some came all the way from Nubia. It must have been loaded onto barges and carried along the Nile or canals near the Nile to the building site. Ta-da! There's your pyramids, Khufu, your family. The Great Pyramid at Giza was built for King Khufu, the 2nd pharaoh of the 4th dynasty of Egypt's Old Kingdom. And then his son's there too, and some other people. For a pharaoh's last voyage, you'll need a boat. So that was mentioned in the last lesson too, I believe, that oftentimes pharaohs were buried with their boats so that they could get to the land of the dead. This boat found in Khufu's Great Pyramid was made of cedar trees. How did the Egyptians get cedar trees? Oh, well, they were trading with the Phoenicians, of course. At this time, the ancient Egyptians did not use the wheel. To get the blocks of stone into place, workers had to use sleds and wooden rollers and levers. They dragged and pushed the huge blocks up ramps of packed rubble to the level they were working on. Workers toiled all year, either in quarries or at the pyramid site. They had to be fed twice a day. I would hope so. Archaeologists have found the remains of their villages, and they know that the builders of the pyramids ate huge quantities of wheat bread. Archaeologists actually found the remains of a bakery among grave sites of the workers. Building pyramids was dangerous work. Each year, men lost their lives, crushed by falling blocks or falling themselves. But the workers, at least we hope, believed in the importance of their work. To build a pyramid was an act of faith. It was the way of ensuring their pharaoh's place in the afterlife. And they believed that their pharaoh was a deity, right? So they're hoping that that means something to them in their lives when their pharaoh dies. Like, maybe my pharaoh will remember that we worked really hard on that pyramid. Maybe. All right, so notes. All right, that's it for today. And we'll see you later.